Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I received a call just the other day, actually, from someone interested in psychotherapy, and she asked the question, she may be listening to this tape now, hello, how long will it take before you know whether indeed I need psychotherapy or not? So it's a particular type of question, and certainly a valid one. However, it does not always hold water in every case, and there are other ways of asking the question which may approximate what psychotherapy does. It's an enrichment. Psychotherapy is an enrichment, and no doubt about it, it's at times very necessary. And other questions, however, that might approximate what this particular lady was asking is, do I need, for example, do I need to respond to my mind differently? So you already are in a psychotherapeutic understanding with that question, and perhaps that type of question is unknown to many people who are seeking psychotherapy. Certainly an important question, because that is a particular enrichment. A lot of folks are not aware that there's a distinction between themselves, so to speak, and their minds, and developing a relationship and, if you will, psychological distance between what we call awareness or the self, the meta-perception, and the mind, which operates automatically, is a very critically important capacity that is cultivated in psychotherapy. We are not our minds. So that is a very key, important understanding and enrichment that can occur through some psychotherapeutic approaches. And I'm going to speak now as if all psychotherapeutic approaches are sophisticated. So we're going to be talking about psychotherapy. Really, I'm going to call sophisticated psychotherapy. I'm aware not all psychotherapies are sophisticated. Sophisticated meaning wise, Sophia, wise, and helpful in some of the senses that I discuss. One of them, for example, is this capacity to observe the mind. Very, very critical. We imagine ourselves to be passive observers of life. I mean, that's the spell of life. We believe that we are here observing an objective field, and we slowly become more aware, with wisdom developing, that we are very much a part of the personal reality that we are experiencing, that this reality is really a subject-object relationship, that what you're bringing to reality is very important. It is actually generating your reality. So, another question would be, can I benefit from psychotherapy? And another question that perhaps might be better than the idea of whether I need to. Certainly that is an important question for some folks, but not everyone. So there is indeed benefits from psychotherapy. I myself function from a mindfulness-based approach, and this is without a doubt an extraordinary enhancement, and I'm going to explain a bit about that. Say, for example, that you have a pattern of feeling disappointed with yourself, and that you feel essentially inadequate, and you disappoint yourself. You wish you weren't as inadequate as you believe yourself to be. So you might consider, well, if you're feeling inadequate, what you might do is enrich yourself and become more adequate. Okay, so in other words, develop adequacies as a response to the idea that you are inadequate. So if a psychotherapy approaches your problem in that manner, it is actually a non-psychotherapy. And yeah, that's a very important understanding. And why? Because the idea that you are inadequate is indeed the problem itself. It is the idea. It is not the judgment. You do not have necessarily an objectively forming inadequacy. It is very likely memory. In other words, a schema, a mental pattern that tends to externalize and get itself validated by experience. So, if you do not know about these processes, if you are responding to your sense of your dislike for yourself with, for example, well, trying to get better self-esteem, perhaps looking good, being impressive, redeeming your honor and becoming much more honored by others. If that's your course of action, you are at risk of simply perpetuating the problem, because that is the actual problem. That is what we call a compensation. We begin to compensate as if we are inherently insufficient, as if we are inherently inadequate, as if we are inherently unlovable. So again, here we see the trap of the pseudotherapy, the efforts to correct the problem. You're actually caught in the terms of the defectiveness schema. It's a defectiveness schema. It's a schemata. That means it's a mental pattern. It is the idea that you are defective. Of course, ideas, folks, are self-fulfilling. They objectify, they externalize, they form as personal reality. They are also subject to, if you will, a law of attraction. Events in the external world begin to conform with these underlying assumptions, a deep belief. So, for the lady who asked me, how long will it take me to determine whether I need psychotherapy, is not exactly the issue. What is the issue is that this insight is very, very necessary to break what we call life traps. You end up caught in an idea, and you assume that idea to be reality itself, the bottom line. And I must confess, in my own life, it took some time for me to gain psychological distance. I myself had and have the defectiveness schema. However, my defectiveness schema for many, many years was maladjusted. I had a complex. In other words, I had a coping, a non-adaptive, maladjusted coping mode attached to my sense of being defective, of my sense of being inadequate, of being somewhat of an alien, and I was very compensatory. I would attempt to look good, redeem honors, say clever things, look well, and which is all wonderful. However, it was very fear-driven, and I had a lot of social anxiety, and it was very mysterious. I did not know how to manage it and how to reduce the symptoms. My efforts to reduce the symptoms increased the symptoms. You might say I certainly needed psychotherapy. The path that I took, however, was becoming a psychotherapist myself, and I built my insight up. However, up until the time that I began to meditate, I really was still in this compensatory organization, and I was actually still aggravating the condition by degree. Once I began to see that I was compulsively or somewhat obsessively preoccupied by looking good and redeeming my honor, I at last realized that I was perpetuating the schema complex. I had to actually supplant my maladjusted coping mode with an adaptive one. That adaptive coping mode is mindfulness. I did take the time out to increase my meditations with the help of the Insight Meditation Center that does Vipassana meditation. I did get better, and I then entered a Zen setting and practiced Zen meditation, Zazen, which of course is another form of non-conceptual awareness. And sometime later I did find the Advaita Vedanta, the non-duality of the Advaita Vedanta, and the processes of self-inquiry. And I developed an alternative response to the presence of my defectiveness schema. Okay, so the defectiveness schema is not the problem itself. When we have the maladjusted coping modes attached to them, boomo, you're on your way to more suffering, so to speak, because you have a pseudotherapy that is perpetuating the problem. Pseudotherapy means the complex itself. Now, if you're taking drugs because you have the pain of discomfort, for example, or even alcohol, which helps to disinhibit you, helps to reduce some of the sense of being defectiveness, you can end up relying on the chemical, and then you have an avoidant style attached to your defectiveness schema. So the liberation from the psychological suffering, the liberation from the complex, is the interruption of the maladjusted coping mode, whether it be avoidant, as in anesthetizing, as in, not coming out of the house, as in over shopping, sex addiction, etc., or compensatory, attempting to look good, being exceptional, being overly driven. These all leave us stuck in the complex, and so we need to understand how to undermine a complex, and the way to do it is to make a distinction between our thinking and our awareness. The thinking perspective generally can be characterized as seeing things the way they should be. Yeah, I probably would be wise to say that again. There is a perspective, and we're going to keep this perspective.